primary education sector, primary early education sector, they decided that we need to do something for higher education, which is how the university was born. It initially started with PG programs, but after in 2015, they officially launched the UG programs as well. And our idea of this education is for social change. And what do we mean by social change? Our mission is to contribute to a just, equitable, humane, and sustainable society. Through our education, we hope our students, when they graduate, go on to become the kind of citizens who contribute to this mission. We have 5 PG programs: MA Development, MA Public Policy and Governance, MA Education, LLM in Law, that is Masters in Law and Development, and MA Economics. Today, of course, we'll be focusing on the UG programs. We have 10 UG programs. We currently have 1,200 students in all. 2,300 alumni are out there working in the remote corners of the country trying to contribute to society. And we have 150 faculty members who are extremely distinguished, very well qualified, and not just qualified in terms of education. Many of them have actually been in the field, have had very good world experiences, which they bring to the campus. We have 2 streams, a 3-year program and a 4-year program. The 3-year program has 2 parts, the BA programs and the BSc programs. And within the BA programs, we have BA Economics, BA English, BA History, and BA Philosophy. Within the BSc programs, we have BSc Biology, BSc Physics, and BSc Mathematics. So it's one of the options. These are not combined programs. Each one is an individual program. Then we have the 4-year dual degree program, BSc B.Ed, in the field of biology, physics, and mathematics. But along with your BSc, you get a B.Ed degree or an educational degree. And this is a professional degree that will allow you not just to teach, but I would say also to get into the education sector as a whole. This is the general structure. Every program has a specialization, which is based on the major that you've selected. So whether it's maths, physics, or biology, or history, or English, or philosophy, or economics. Then we have something called common curriculum. It's a very exciting part of our program that is mandatory for students of all programs in the first year. So whichever, even if you're from biology or physics or maths or whatever, you have to go through the common curriculum in the first year. Finally, we have something called option to take honors path. It is not compulsory. It is for those who have a research interest in terms of a career, they wish to go into a research path. This will give you a taste of what research feels like. So you will have to propose a topic with the help of a faculty. The faculty will guide you in this and come up with an abstract, a proposal for the thesis. And if the faculty approves it, then you will be allowed to go on to do a research project in that topic with the guidance of the faculty, of course. And this will give you extra additional 12 credits, which makes your program or your degree qualify as an honors degree. Time taken to finish will be the same. You will still finish in the same 3 years. So it just means you will have to put in some extra work. So what do our students do after graduating? There are 3 areas. The first area is in the area of higher studies, and within that there are 2 sub areas that they go to. They do higher studies in disciplinary areas or interdisciplinary areas. What that means, I'll explain in a minute. And lastly, of course, some of them join the workforce or take up fellowships. So disciplinary areas means if they have done a BSc Maths or Physics or Biology, they continue to do a MSc in Maths, Physics, Biology, or then maybe even further down, they do a PhD. And these are some of the areas where they do it. Some of the places where they go study. NCBS, IIT Madras is particularly famous for their MSc Maths, and central universities, of course, DU and JNU, etc. in Delhi. And then Tata Institute of Fundamental Research, and some go abroad, like as you can see, University of Rotterdam, Glasgow, Warwick in UK. So they have gone on to specialize in their chosen area of field. That is what we mean by higher studies in disciplinary areas. Now, higher studies in interdisciplinary areas, this is slightly more unique and interesting and not surprising given our undergraduate program structure. Students decide that, yes, I have a background in biology, but I'd like to go on to do something, say, maybe in statistics and combine the two. Or I'd like to use my biological knowledge for environmental purpose or wildlife. As you can see, that's the kind of interdisciplinary area they enter: development studies, development economics, social anthropology, Public policy, some of them come on to study in Azim Premji University, Masters in Public Policy or Masters in Development, MA in Development, MA in Education, where it's not just the specialization they gained in undergrad, but they will be exposed to a wide range of different fields. And with along with their specialization, they will contribute to a certain field. The reason this happens is because in the undergraduate program, we give a lot of leeway and freedom for them to choose electives from other programs. So you could be a bio student who's studying a statistics elective from maths. You could be a math student who's studying philosophy as an elective because you want to ask deeper questions about why things are the way they are. So that sort of, or a philosophy student can be studying a history elective. So that freedom to expose yourself to different fields while specializing in one is what leads many of them to go on to an interdisciplinary area. And I think in today's world, that's very important, right? Because no field can stand by itself. Every field has to work with other fields. So it's good to be specialized in one, but also have a broad view of other subjects. So many of them go on, like say TISS, Tata Institute of Social Science, Azim Premji University, School of Advanced Studies, London, to just name a few of the institutes where they go. Sorry. Work-wise, these are some of the organizations they go to. Some go to the NGO sector, some take up fellowships like Teach for India, where you will be placed in a rural school and be asked to teach a particular subject for 2 years. And you'll get a lot of exposure. Teach for India graduates or fellows generally do very well in the education sector. It's a very nice program. And some associate themselves with the Azim Premji Foundation, and they are placed again in one of our field institutes to work on education. PRS Legislative Research is an organization in Delhi that works on research for parliamentarians. That means they help lawmakers, MLAs, MPs with policy making. This is the actual process. Right now, the application is open. The last date for application is April 9th, right? 9th of April. Then you have your national entrance test on 25th April. It is a Sunday, and I think we have 30 entrance test centers across the country, but Manoja can confirm that in a minute. And this is how the question paper will be. It will have two sections, an English and quantitative section. When I say English, it is not going to be very high funda in that sense, but if you are someone who reads even the newspaper regularly, that is the kind of base on which the paper will be set. It will be a passage, a reading comprehension, and you will have to read through that passage and then answer questions based on the passage. Most of the English section is based on this structure. Quantitative, in terms of maths knowledge, is not more than 10 standard. But what it will test is more from a skills point of view. It will not ask you a particular topic like geography, trigonometry, and say, find out the angle of this triangle. No. What it will look at is these are the kind of questions you can get. One, database. That means you have to read a graph and then infer data and answer the questions based on that, right? There'll be a graph, say, on rainfall across the country, and then you'll have to, reading the graph, answer a question, which state has the highest, or which city in India has the highest rainfall per annum, that sort of question. Then there'll be pattern recognition. So you'll have a square with a shade inside, and then the shaded part will shift to another part of the square. And the next one, you'll have to figure out what is the third part in the pattern. Or it could be a number series pattern, So 1, 3, 5, 7. Okay, what is the fourth one? It is 9 because it's all, but it'll be a little more complex than what I just said, but just as an example. So this will be the English and quantitative aptitude test. This is for 2 hours, after which you have a 1 hour major specific descriptive paper. What that means is it will be a descriptive section. So the first part is a multiple choice question paper, right? The English and quantitative part. And very important point to note, students always make this mistake. Every correct answer gets 2 marks. Every wrong answer gets -1. So there is negative marking for wrong answers. So try not to do a wild guess. Try not to do a random guess. If you're sure, only answer. Okay. Now that section is over. You have a 1 hour section called a descriptive paper, where depending on what subject you chose when putting in your application for the university, if it's maths, you'll have a maths-based question paper, which will have some sums, problems that you'll have to solve. If it's history, then you'll probably have some text from a historical book, and then you'll be asked to interpret it or write your own thoughts based on that. So it depends on the subject you've chosen. Now, all of this is available on the website. I will share the link on the Zoom chat once I close this PPT about where you can find these past papers to practice. Now, once the entrance test is over, the results typically take 2 to maximum 3 weeks, and then you'll have your interviews in June. Brand new campus, which has just been built, and we've all moved in there. It's 80 acres and it's got world-class facilities. Now, you will obviously, every student wonders how to fund their education. One thing you do not have to worry about in Azim Premji University is we are, so as a university with a very clear social purpose, we do not want any student to be left behind for lack of finance. Right? So we have very generous scholarships, and the scholarship bandwidth starts at 15 lakhs per annum of family income. That means if your family income is below 15 lakhs per annum, you qualify for a scholarship. And there are various stages, like I think 12 to 15 is one, then 7 to 10 is one, then 4 to 7, and then below 4, if I'm not wrong, below 4 lakhs of net family income, you qualify for 100% scholarship. That means tuition fee and hostel charges both are waived. You might have to only pay for your food charges. And in very difficult cases, we also give them an allowance for that, because we understand that students come from that kind of difficult backgrounds. This scholarship will not be based on your marks. Once you qualify for the seat, your marks no longer matter for the scholarship. It's only based on their income. Okay, that's so usually they say merit come means. No, it is only means here. So it doesn't matter what your score was. Once you've qualified and you've got the offer, the scholarship starts on a fresh basis, right? And you will have a separate, very detailed interview for that to understand your situation.